Sean Kilkenny. We've done this once before, haven't we?
Yes, probably a little while ago now, Robbie.
Yeah, same things happening in Australia as they were the last time we spoke, man. I had a great conversation with Barry about ducks, and you're probably going to shake your head and go, yep, the same thing's happening with deer, but I'll just say that the intricate politics that are at play around duck hunting and the nuances tied to the person switching sides, the referendum coming forward, Indigenous rights, the idea that the unions and the tradies are now putting pressure on the backbenchers that are now like, we may not be against duck hunting anymore because you're affecting our pocketbook and the potential of getting elected again.
Yeah, look, it is, obviously I'm based in Victoria, so I see firsthand a lot of the work that's going in and around the duck stuff. Often when I'm in house doing deer stuff, I run to doing duck stuff. Yeah, so really cognizant of the amount of work that they're going on, the challenges that they're dealing with.
Well, Sean Kilkenny, welcome back to the Blood Origins podcast. For those that may not be familiar with who you are, can you give us a brief description of your title, who you work for, what you're passionate about?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Sean Kilkenny. I work as the Advocacy and Deer Management Lead for the Australian Deer Association. The Australian Deer Association is a not-for-profit that was established in 1969, and we effectively work for the management of wild deer and advocate strongly for public land access for recreational hunters, ensuring that we are a part of this conversation surrounding wild deer and ensuring that our members and also the broader public get access to these fantastic public lands that we have available and that we're a part of the conversation.
So, for those that aren't familiar with the scene in Australia, let's set the tone kind of scenario. How many deer species can you hunt in Australia?
So there's 6 introduced deer species in Australia. They're not all. So obviously Australia's rather large, not too dissimilar to the States. All 6 species aren't necessarily everywhere.
It's about as wide as the United States. People don't actually realize how big Australia is.
No, it's, I think it's a 5-day drive from one side to the other, it's not an overnighter. And, effectively you go from one country to another when you drive such distances. If that was Europe, you'd probably gone past 30 countries. But yeah, so obviously, for the most part, most wild deer are established around the eastern seaboard, mostly starting in Victoria, then working their way up through New South Wales into the bottom of Queensland. So we've got a great dividing range, which is like a mountain range, which runs north to south along the eastern seaboard, which basically is a wildlife corridor for most animals. So it's kind of natural for them to wander their way through there.
Yeah, and you're not going to find many deer species, if any, at all west of the dividing range, right?
No, traditionally speaking, because on the interior of Australia, it's fairly arid. It's not really sustainable to many populations of a lot of wildlife, or particularly in low abundance. It's a very arid interior.
So, fallow deer, red deer, axis, sambar, hog.
And
what
chital.
Did I miss? Chital.
Yep.
Didn't I say axis?
You might have. What did you? I didn't hear you. What was it?
Do you have... so let's start again. No, maybe I didn't say fallow. I said fallow, sambar, axis, hog, red. What am I missing? Sika. No, you don't have Sika. Rusa. That's it. Number 6, Rusa.
Yeah.
Most abundant deer species to hunt in Australia, Sean?
Yeah, so look, for the most part, there's two populations that are the most significant, and that's the fallow and the sambar. And they're a fairly significant animal between themselves. You've got obviously the fallow, which is the European based, and it prefers, your open farm fringes type area, and that's where they'll mob up and they'll live. But then you've also got the sambar, which is an Asiatic species, which Does a lot better in the forested areas, but at the same time isn't afraid of living in fringe country as well.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So give us a little bit of background, Sean, to how these deer are managed. Are they managed? And I know we're going to get into you. There was obviously just a big action plan developed for the essentially entire country. But are deer regulated at both the state level as well as a national level?
No. So obviously Australia's a federation. We've got all the states and territories. There's overlap in certain legislation or dictation of what can apply between those two levels, but for the most part, states tend to run their own state. In this case, for example, each different state and territory will have different contextual views on how to manage deer, whether it's such as, we include recreational hunting or we don't include it at all. So whilst there is a generic framework that's been written nationally, that's not prescriptive to the states about what you need to do. Ultimately, each state just rows its own boat.
So, Sean, what states, again, just some context here, what states can someone publicly hunt deer in Australia?
So, New South Wales, Victoria, and Tasmania.
No.
They're the three.
There's no. What about, so South Australia has no public land to hunt, or is it just not allowed? So there's no
public land access. Yes, there's no public land available there. You can hunt on private property if you have access. The same as with Queensland. You need to arrange it through private property. Actually, technically, there is public land available in the Northern Territory, but there's not that many deer there, so it's
yeah. Sure. Did they used to have public land deer hunting in South Australia and Queensland, or is it just never been on the
From
cards?
memory, I think they actually did in Queensland in about the 1950s, but then there were some changes that I can't recall off the top of my head, but they effectively put an end to it. So for a lot of people, they've grown up without it existing.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think, being the advocacy person at ADA, do you think that there is a chance of either of those states opening up public land deer hunting in the future?
Look, I'd like to say never say never, but at the same time, it's not going to be tomorrow. You never know what's
Sean,
around
politics
the corner.
doesn't move that quickly? Politics doesn't move that quickly?
Well, look, you never know, but it's something that we always try and engage with to have that conversation, so that if that time or opportunity presents, that we're there to make the most of it. But at the same time, it's obviously when you've got, say, you're starting off a base where there's no public land access for this activity at all. You're trying to create something from nothing. Or even more so, if you're trying to create something from a no to turn it to a yes, is much harder than turning something from a I don't have an opinion to a yes.
No, 100%.
And then if you want to throw in those overlays about, you increase the urbanizations of society, people that don't have that contact with, spending time on the land or harvesting your own food, type of interaction with their food supply. Presenting something like this gives you even more groundwork to make up because it's so foreign to the person listening to you.
So, Sean, with that context, you just sort of laid everything out for everyone. Like, here's the situation for deer in Australia. States are managing it. You can public hunt in some areas, private hunt in other areas. But there was a national plan that was just released, that was developed and released. Tell me about that national plan. If the states don't have to abide by it, who wrote it at the national level, and what implications does it have then at the state level if they don't really, well, I don't even know the word. They're not beholden to a greater authority. Yeah.
And look, I guess this is the great, one of these great bureaucracies. So effectively, the plan was written effectively out of South Australia, which has a somewhat negative view on deer at the moment. Um,
What is the plan first and foremost for everyone's
so
benefit?
yeah, so effectively, what the plan does and what it says is, for the most part, it draws a big map. It's got a map of Australia, and it draws a big circle around where the existing deer populations are, and it says where these deer populations currently are. We can't do a huge amount other than manage their impacts, and let's prioritise that and work back from your most valuable or vulnerable potential ecological assets and prioritise them and then work down. And then where you have areas where there are no deer or very small isolated populations, let's look to have a program or encourage states to monitor that and ensure that they stay small, or prevent further spread. So that we sort of, what we've got now is what we deal with in the future, to sort of move our way forward. So in that sense, it's actually not exactly a silly idea. In Victoria, we have a deer control strategy where we actually initially proposed to have it divided into zones like that, where you say, well, here's your big mountain regions where all the deer are not going anywhere. Let's manage them in that regard. Due to some politicking on the other side of people that just oppose recreational hunters, they effectively torpedo those plans. And now we've got this new east to west and peri-urban design, which is another way of reinventing the wheel, but that's another issue. But also back onto the federal plan. So for that, mostly you've got that sort of framework which describes, where those populations are, where they want to try and maintain them, and then it looks effectively to say, well, at the moment, here are the best options to manage them, and then ultimately we want to create additional options in the use of managing or controlling deer. And that's where they come to the sticking point of prioritising the development of poisons, which fundamentally we're opposed to. We don't like poison. Poison's inhumane. It's cruel. It's a complete waste of a resource. There's nothing good about poison. That's pretty much the only way that you can look at it. Ultimately, they're going to try and use this as a stalking horse to push through and develop the way to deploy. I would suggest 1080 onto wild deer. And 1080's been virtually all around the world, except for the most part in Australia and New Zealand. We seem to be using it still. The RSPCA in Australia,
nobody else in the world uses 1080 except Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, look, don't quote me exactly on that, but for the most part, a lot of countries have. I think even like the States banned it in the 70s. Just put a line through and said, this stuff's just too grim. And even, I guess you call our peak animal welfare body over here, the RSPCA, they consider 1080 inhuman as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It still gets deployed. So it's not great.
Sean, how can a state like South Australia write a quote unquote federal deer management plan? What kind of authority allows them to put that label on it like that? This is the federal action plan.
So effectively what's happened, when we say that it's written effectively out of South Australian, it was South Australian, I guess we could call them bureaucrats, that were employed by the federal apparatus to undertake this and to create a working group to support them drive through what's been written. So It's not the actual state of it itself that wrote it, but people that work within that state hold those perceptions local to deal in that state that then influence the broader subject.
Who at the federal level, was it the Department of Environment? I'm not familiar with the various departments in Australia, but was it the Department of Environment driving it?
No, this actually all comes under the Department of Agriculture.
Okay.
So most people sort of default to environment, but no, it's actually ag.
Did they have a federal deer action plan or before this one?
So this was the
first ever.
Yeah, this was the first. And look, it's not to say that there shouldn't be a plan. There should be, like all animals that need to be managed. There should be a plan. There should be an attempt to create some consistency across the country, as opposed to having everyone doing something different. This is where we saw this as an opportunity to sort of mature the conversation regarding wild deer. Acknowledging, hey, look, they're not going to go anywhere. Um, what can we do to maintain them? Also, maintain the impacts that they have or reduce impacts that they might have. But at the same time, look, they do provide significant contributions to society, whether it's through the ability for people to spend time in the bush, connecting to nature, or that significant financial input into the economy that they create. So in Victoria, I think alone, it's worth nearly $250 million a year, just recreational deer hunting. Um, you
Yep.
know, you wouldn't sneeze on it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, I think if I remember correctly, New South Wales alone, like the GDP of New South Wales, hunting, and maybe fishing is lumped into it too, but hunting is like the second GDP producer in the state of New South Wales behind agriculture.
Yeah, so I think it's hunting and fishing put together there, and it's one of the largest primary industries.
Yep, yep, it's what I remember.
Like it's what people undertake these activities. Um,
Hunt.
Despite we having a bit of an urbanisation of society, people look for this way to spend time in the bush, engage, put food on the table. It's it's still quite popular.
So in this federal deer management plan, did they even acknowledge deer as a resource, as a game resource, as something that can feed people potentially? One of the things that I'm amazed that doesn't occur in Australia right now is a Hunters for the Hungry program, right? Being able to take deer and
Yeah.
give it to the homeless, give it to. There shouldn't be a single hungry person in Australia because of the wonderful resource that you have on the landscape.
Yeah, well, you're right. Look, there are some glaring issues that stand out from it, but look, ultimately, the scope that the report or the plan was written was uh, only from the perspective to suggest that, oh, look, deer are an introduced animal, they need to be maintained or managed. Here's the framework to do it. It in that way, it was probably more so from a negative perspective. There wasn't that, let's look at this from a macro point of view and say, here are the pros and cons of deer being in Australia. Here's how we manage the pros and here's how we manage the cons. It's more so focused, okay, let's just focus on potential cons and what we can do around that, which is one of those missed opportunities where it's like, well, there's actually more to it than just that.
But there was a public comment period. There was a submission period for the federal deer
Yes, there
action
was.
plan, and I'm
Yeah.
sure there was a bunch of
Uh,
like game resource heavy type comments that went in, right?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Look, so, the beauty of consultation. There was a period where people could provide feedback to that. Um, I done, I facilitated a means of doing that for hunters, and there was about 3,000 submissions that went in. Of the 3,000 that went in, approximately 1,800 of them were um, driven from the platform that ADA had set up, which was, saying, look, we need to introduce a value to this animal. 1080 poison isn't the way to go. To include recreational hunter and acknowledge the role that they play in, what they can contribute to managing deer species. Um, but ultimately, once the report was drafted and that was effectively its conclusion, it was nearly a tick box where they said, "Oh, yeah, look, we put it to consultation." One of the changes that they made from the draft into the final product was they removed like the poison logo and then put like a sort of an R&D logo instead.
What do you
Just
mean a
sort of,
poison logo? What is a poison logo?
it's kind of like that nuclear sort of the three
Yeah, the
sort of
little
like the
triangle that
triangles.
gives you like a warning label, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah. So that was initially where it said, "Hey, let's develop a poison." That was like the logo for that in the infograph. But then when they got so much feedback about it being popular. I tried to de-escalate that and put like a bit of a more of a vanilla R&D picture. Sure. It's like, really? You know, so it's incredibly frustrating, how these things can pan out.
So the plan doesn't mention recreational hunting, recreational management as a tool, or does it suggest that that is something that can be taken up on a state-by-state level?
No, so effectively, when it speaks to recreational hunters, it fairly quickly dismisses them to say that, oh, some people hunt for trophies or some people hunt for meat, etc. They're not a part of a specific deployment of management. And to a degree, that's true. Where look, people go out and recreationally hunt for the sake of whatever reason they do. But the consequence of them doing that is that there's a huge amount of deer harvested from them doing it. So in Victoria alone, it was last year 155,000 deer harvested by recreational hunters. And that seems to be relatively consistent over the last 3 to 4 years off the top of my head without COVID interrupting it too much. There was one year where that was obviously quite low because everyone was
Sure.
at home. But for the most part, like that's around, you need 150,000 deer that get harvested by these people. But there's no way that you can pretend that that doesn't have an impact on the population of deer.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Sure.
sort of,
What is there a number? Let's just use Victoria as an example. Victoria obviously has a very large sandbar deer population. 150 odd thousand, as you mentioned, are taken by recreational hunting. Is there a number? And again, I don't know if it's the Game Animal Council that's in charge of sandbar deer, the Game Management Authority, GMA. Sorry. Do they have a number that they're trying to hit on an annual basis for deer take in the state of Victoria?
no, so at the moment, GMA record, uh, or they do the surveys to do the estimations of the harvest each year. That's literally because we have licensed hunters, so they know who to talk to, who to survey, etc. So they can pull that data out. They don't have necessarily goals or anything. They just want to record what that data is, and then they can build a picture. But so far as, oh, look, we want to harvest X or Y, that's not a part of the conversation at this point.
So, that's interesting. Is it so? No, there's no mandatory reporting of sandbar deer take or any deer take in Victoria right now.
The only deer species that you need to provide a report for is if during hog deer season that you're hunting hog deer. Um, that's more regulated again because there's only effectively 3,000 of them. You can only hunt them in certain areas at certain times. So there's a bit more process or rigor behind that. That's an outlier at the same time. Yeah, when you're talking, fallow slash sambar, if you go and shoot one on the weekend and then turn into a salami in 2 weeks' time, no one will effectively know about it until this thing gets surveyed. So there's no
So
reporting.
if there's no management goal, and you probably know what I'm about to say. If there's no management goal for like this is the number we are interested in, it sounds like there really is. It's a free for all from the government perspective in spending taxpayer dollars for aerial culling that has an objective of, dare I say, eradication. Whether even if that's probably not possible.
Yeah, I guess this is where there's probably a bit of misconception or confusion, and not necessarily helped by some of the government agencies who don't necessarily publish a huge amount of data on this sort of stuff. So in Victoria alone, we do have aerial culling that occurs. It's been going for a while. New South Wales has it going on all the time. Now it's even happening in Tassie, it happens in Queensland. It's the new norm, effectively.
Yeah.
But where it happens, say, for example, in Victoria, the way that our peak body government agency that manages the land is part of Victoria.
Okay.
They effectively, as stewards of the land, they have like an asset value register, for example, and it will say here are the most valuable assets in these across our land tenure. Um, Here's the risk that they're exposed to, whether depending on what's there, whether it's foxes, cats attacking something or predating something, or there's an introduced ball or a weed that's having an impact on something else. We then create programs to address that. Where that then becomes relevant to deer is, for example, we've got in our alpine regions, there's some alpine peat boglands at the very top there that can be susceptible to deer wallowing in them. And so that's where they'll deploy in some of those far remote areas where you can't actually publicly access, you're not legally allowed to hunt there. So, for example, the Snow River National Park, they'll deploy the helicopters to there and then shoot. Effectively, it's a shoot to rot program. Obviously they're flying around in helicopters that just shoot them out and let them go, which isn't great, but then it obviously reduces the impact that they could have on those peatlands.
Sure.
Which, look, it's not great, it's not sexy, but unfortunately that is a part of the dynamic of managing these animals in these remote areas where there's, at this point in time, no other option.
And let's just for let me stop you for a second on that no other option. I think that's an important piece there, Sean, is that hunters they get riled up a lot about aerial culling, right? But there's certain places where it's necessary.
Yeah, and where it is necessary, the degree of necessity is also obviously debatable. So, for example, where I'd say, look, there is a direct need for it in, say, the snowies, but at the same time, at the moment, there's no public land access available to the snowies. And that's where I'm openly engaging and consulting with the government about saying, end of the day, if you do want deer removed there, why would you not let the single largest cohort of people that remove the most deer from the landscape access to this area? Look, they're not going to remove every single deer there. What they might do is give you a good baseline and start to reduce the numbers. And then if you still have a need to remove an additional amount of deer to help get the impacts to the level that you want them, you can then have an aerial program that could complement or work outside of seasons so that the recreational hunters can do their thing and then you still achieve your management goal after that. In the meantime, it might as well save you millions of dollars on the helicopter.
Yeah, no, well, that makes sense, right? In terms of saving money, saving government tax dollars and whatnot, but
yeah, and it's just a pragmatic solution where, look, the reality is the deer aren't going anywhere, so you got to find a sustainable, ongoing solution. And I think part of that was, like, you literally have to use that free workforce that's in front of you. And, enable these people to go there and harvest this free-range meat. Yeah, it is a common sense, easy win that will help mature the conversation regarding managing these animals.
Sean, I was fortunate enough earlier this year to spend 4 or 5 days with Roy Sloan down at the Wapiti Foundation down in the South Island, New Zealand. Obviously, Roy has figured it out. They managed the numbers, they pull all the meat off the landscape, and they actually get in the chopper with the government shooters and say, take that one, don't touch that one, don't touch that one. Creating a trophy-type landscape, which then cascades to what you're talking about, puts even greater demand for those guys, those recreational shooters, wanting to go into that landscape to clean up animals because the trophy quality is there. Has anybody attempted anything like that in Australia?
I'm not aware of. And look, Australia and New Zealand share a lot of similarities in a way where we all go through similar issues, but at different points in time. So they obviously went through what they called the deer wars there, where effectively 100%. That's probably what we're walking into now. Yep. So there's going to be a lot of hullabaloo, then we're going to end up back at square one, and realizing something sustainable is going to be huge reliance on or uplift in using recreational hunters. So we're about to go through that, so that's going to be fun times. But the reality is, unfortunately, you can sort of see these unfold, but you can't necessarily stop it. You're just going to try and shape the outcome. And ultimately, this is when opportunities that come along where, we try and help influence or provide land managers with, the understanding or the knowledge that we can obtain from other jurisdictions around the world about how to manage these things. So, for
Yeah.
example, earlier this year, the ADA brought over 3 American wildlife biologists.
Oh my gosh, you brought Bronson Strickland over, didn't you?
Yes, Dr. Bronson Strickland. He
Oh,
was
don't
over.
talk too much about him. We don't want to give him too big of a head, old Bronson.
Bronson's a good bloke. He's a good bloke. Mr. Strickland, Kip Adams, and Dr. Craig Harper.
Yep.
And so we got those guys over, and we got them to present in front of, quite a few actual state-based management agencies, and talk about what happens in. Obviously, in this occasion, it was in the United States, and how they have sustainable programs in urban areas regarding deer management. Because ultimately, what happens there, it's very similar to what will happen here. It's just the context is that they're a native species, whereas here it's an introduced one. But ultimately, you want to manage them and reduce human wildlife conflicts, they call it, in that particular context. So it's like not too dissimilar to New Zealand, where these events are happening around the world. And it's incumbent on us to learn from them and then share that resource here and try and uplift that conversation so that we can deliver better outcomes for everybody involved.
Yeah, no, 100%. I was a professor in the same department that Bronson is in for 6 years. That's how I know Bronson. Yeah, I was in the wildlife fisheries department at Mississippi State University.
There you go, small world.
Yeah, Bronson's a good mate. He's a really, really great extension deer ecologist, essentially, trained under Damaris and Harry Jacobs, and just, knows his stuff and knows how to interact with people, because that's the extension job that he occupies here in Mississippi.
Yeah, he's fantastic at being able to translate, like what he would call the nerd stuff into just everyday talk, so that, you'd walk away knowing exactly what was going on. And put this way, when the 3 of the guys were in the car, I was listening to every word they said.
Yeah, the only thing with Bronson is you got to make sure that he wears a camo hat, or we camo up his head, because his shiny dome is going to shine, scare off the deer,
No. Look, we had a great. I spent 2 weeks in Australia, 1 week in Victoria and 1 week in Tassie, and it was a fantastic trip. And hopefully we've got some exciting stuff that can come out of it over the next few years. These things aren't overnight, but you plant the seed and water like hell.
Sure, absolutely. Let me ask this question from a private land perspective, tying back to aerial culling. Do private land individuals need to give permission to the government to be able to aerial cull on their properties, or is it government has a loophole that they're like, we can do whatever we want?
So this is where it probably gets complicated, and based on each different state will have their own jurisdictions will have different rules.
Okay.
So I could probably only speak in generic terms.
Let's just talk about Victoria.
So at the moment, we don't have, to my knowledge, there's not aerial culling that occurs on any private property. The only time it does occur is on land tenure within Parks Victoria, so effectively some national parks. For the most part, Snowden is the big one next door, and then the approach along the coast there. So there's that's based on where they're focusing their limited resources to manage it the most valuable ecological asset effectively. So scaling down. It also, what comes back to that is it depends on the status of deer within that state. So in Victoria, technically they couldn't do that because deer aren't a pest. So they would be able to impose that through a particular act. So they need like an act that would enable them to undertake certain activities. But then within doing those activities, then obviously then be certain lists of processes that they need to follow, etc. So yeah, look, it can get pretty complicated depending on which jurisdiction you're talking to.
Right now, South Australia, there's that ABC News video that's going around like crazy of the recreational deer hunter nearly being shot at by the helicopter. That's culling on private ground. It sounded like permission given to cull from a previous landowner.
Yeah, so South Australia is an interesting one. So a quick overview of what's happening in South Australia is there's obviously there's no effective the recognition of wild deer there at all. They're considered under the Landscape Act 2019, they're considered a feral pest, and under that act, the government has the ability for any flora or fauna that they declare under that act, they can compel a landowner to take action regarding that plant or animal. Um,
Okay.
so it's really broad. It all comes down to what the government of the day decides it wants to do. At the moment, deer is the flavour of the month. So they are trying to eradicate around 40,000 deer, which is would be a world first. They're spending a lot of federal money doing it, so it's not necessarily their own. So whilst they've got that resource there, they're quite happy to try. But what can effectively happen then is, as a landholder, they can say to you, you need to produce a plan that demonstrates how you will eradicate deer from your property. And if we're not satisfied with your plan, we can provide you with an action order, which gives you an undertaking to take specific activities. Over there at the moment, obviously they've got the aerial polling, so if you can't produce a plan which is satisfactory to them, they can then say, well, here's an action order for you to effectively subscribe to the aerial program. If you don't subscribe to the aerial program or follow these action order items, you're then susceptible to being fined and having punishment through that. Plus, ultimately, at the end of the day, if you don't do that, we can still do it, and then we'll send you the bill for it. So it's a
My
very narrow
gosh.
one-way street. Yeah, it's very draconian. And I'm not sure if it's actually been used like this on any other animal in the past. I'm fairly confident it doesn't. It hasn't. But yeah, so look, that incident that happened earlier this year, I think it was in March. Yeah, there was obviously a change of landholder at the time. So the previous permission was given to by, I think it was like a plantation private business. Um, the owner came on, well, purchased the land, and then there wasn't a check to ensure that the current landholder had given permission to effectively the local landscape board to carry out that activity. So there was a process gap there. And that's where those guys obviously had that rather unfortunate encounter with a helicopter, being a few hundred metres away from them, having to go with some deer. Um, but yeah, it's caused a bit of hoo-ha over here, and rightly so, because you don't want that sort of process gap on something so important as that.
Sure.
But I think it's been 6 months since that incident and nothing's happened, which is good. But the the big issue is, ultimately the goal that they're trying to achieve and how they're achieving it with the eradication attempt is what has everyone up in arms about as well.
Sean, what's the next steps here? Obviously, this federal deer action plan is now out. As you said, states can either look at it, adopt it, ignore it, do whatever they want to do with it.
Yeah. And look, that's the big challenge, right? So you've got, like, say, states like Victoria, who's got their own deer management plan that's not terribly old. You've got Tasmania, who just released their wild deer fallow plan, which isn't that old either. So you've got states that have got their own mechanisms that are in place. Um, I don't think that the plan itself is necessarily going to move mountains. The big thing that the plan will probably do is try and create a narrative to deploy or endorse a poison. But the other catch is that whilst you might be able to, say, have 1080 approved for use on deer, the ability for you to deploy it effectively and safely on deer is actually another issue too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to be rather challenging and not necessarily successful either. So you've got New Zealand,
It's
obviously,
just
where
so
it is.
strange. You've got like this thing in Australia that is, yes, you've got like invasive species and you've got huge pest issues, and not that we're calling deer invasive or pests, but it is a country of issues, right?
Yeah.
Toads and foxes and prickly pears and all sorts of things. Yet it's also a country that is very environmentally conscious, that is very green, that is like look after the environment.
Yeah,
The
it's
idea
a
of
strange
bringing,
clash. And like, look, when I talk to politicians and stuff about, the deployment of poison, they all fall over. No one likes it. Like it's just not. Um,
So
there's no social
1080 is
license
not
to do
being
it.
deployed right now in Australia,
No,
right?
no, not for deer.
Okay.
They do use it for, like, I think, for cats and obviously wild dogs. Um, that's extremely regimented about where that is and deployed, and there's a thorough process about where it debates. They're measured where they are and tracked and monitored quite regularly. Um, no, there's no ability for them to use that for deer at the moment. But ultimately, whether it's in 5, 10 years' time, that's where they want to have that within their toolkit.
Gotcha.
But you'll probably find some progressive states that will just never look at it. They'll be like, no, that's just not going to happen. We won't do it. There are other ways.
Wow.
So, whilst there might be an overarching sort of conversation about it, but then each state rows their own boat still, and they'll make their determination of where they think that's appropriate. And that's where, in the APA, and this is what we do, we help to educate and inform those politicians about those policy decisions and the consequences of that, and that there are alternatives there. A lot of the roads lead to recreational hunting or volunteers and deer management programs.
So, Sean, what's the next steps for ADA in the next 6 months between now and the end of the year?
Yeah, so there's a fair bit going on. Obviously, there's the fallout from the federal deer management plan. They can't all get their name right. That's how good the plan is. But so we've got a lot of advocacy work regarding that, sort of helping to reduce the, I guess, the hyperbole and sort of misconceptions that have come out of it. Quite often we hear people suggest that, wild deer can be like these vectors of so many diseases, etc. Whereas, look, for the most part, let's be honest, if wild deer don't go around carrying all these germs and bugs, it's livestock that generally carry all the funky stuff. So, ensuring that conversations like that are sensible, evidence-based, is really big on what we do. And that's actually like a 24/7 role, to be honest, because there's always a conversation that comes up that sort of needs to be rerouted back to actually what's the supporting argument behind that, because that has to be demonstrated. But when it's an introduced animal, the conversation gets halfway down the road before anyone's actually done some fact checking. So there's a lot of work with that, undertaking now federally, and then also a lot of state-based levels. So it's a busy time before Christmas.
Sean, if you had a crystal ball and you talked about the deer wars that you're entering into, same thing that happened in New Zealand, let's fast forward the clock 10 years from now. Are we out of the deer wars in 10 years? Have we got sustainable programs like that, almost equivalent to New Zealand, where you've got people rallying around trophy quality management, sustaining harvest, pulling deer off the landscape, utilizing the resource?
Look, we'll probably never get to that point where we start talking, like that trophy sort of stuff. But I'd like to think that we could get towards a point where, look, there's a recognition that they're not going anywhere, but we can have sustainable management practices that realise the value that the animal provides, whether it's through enabling 50,000 people in Victoria a year to go out and spend time in the bush, or it provides food for the homeless. It supports thousands of people in employment. These are aspirational goals that I think we can work towards, and I think inevitably we will get there. It's just how many layers of paint come off everything in the meantime before we get there. I do think at some point it will be an inevitability, and we'll never stop till we get there. That's the bottom line as well. We're going to push that wheelbarrow as hard as we can for as long as we can, and continuing to inject common sense and rational thought into the conversation regarding managing in Australia.
Sean, where can people find more information about Australian Deer Association? How can they help you?
Yeah, so look, guys, what I'll do, just jump on our website, ausdeer.com.au, or just Google Australian Deer Association. We're obviously a member-based organisation, and mostly they're in Australia, but we also do have an international option. So if you guys want to lend a hand, that's certainly more than welcome. With our international brothers and sisters, you also get access to our magazine in a digital copy as well. So it's pretty cool. That's a really easy way. Follow our socials, just interact on that. Helps you get a bit of an insight into what's going on in the land down under, some of the challenges that we face, and hopefully it might also plant a seed for some people to holiday in Australia as well. We all need an excuse to get out here.
Yeah, holiday and great hunting. Absolutely great hunting, because you've got 6 deer species you can chase. Some on public ground, some on private ground. So, hey, why not?
Yeah, that's right. Look, yeah, it's a country of adventure if you want it.
100%. Sean, always a pleasure to talk to you, my man. I know the conversation was going to be good. 45 minutes rolled round super quick. So thank you, my man. You have a wonderful Tuesday.
No worries. Thanks, Robbie. Anytime.